Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome to this year's Wia Career Paths event, and especially welcome to everyone attending their first Women in Architecture event. My name is Sally Miller. I'm an architect at Urban Arts Architecture. I am a member of the Wia Programming Committee, and I will be moderating our session tonight. First, to start off, I would like to acknowledge that those of us in the Vancouver area are on the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh territories, and we thank them for sharing their lands with us. If you're joining us from outside of the Lower Mainland, we'd love to hear where you're joining us from. If you could let us know in the chat, since we're doing a virtual event, we know it's great to know how far our reach is. If you're not already on our email list and would like to be to follow our future events, please follow the link on our website, wiavancouver.org. We is always looking for volunteers, communications organizing events and special projects. So if you'd like to join us, please feel free to follow the links on the website. Or you can also become a member by joining us through our website as well. This event is eligible for 1.5 AIBC learning units. So if you are wanting to collect learning units, please enter your name and email address and license number if you know it into the chat, and we will collect them and submit them to the AIBC. For today, we have 4 wonderful presentations by our panelists, and we will follow with a Q&A session. And if you have questions for our panelists, please enter them in the chat. And please let us know if it's a general question or directed at a specific panelist. We'd also like to let everyone know that we're recording the presentation today, and it will be made available through our website later on once we get it posted. And then lastly, I'd like to share some news on upcoming events. We just confirmed November 22nd, we will have an event through with the Thoughtful Co. It is a workshop that will enable you to feel confident in asking for the compensation you deserve. They will cover everything from how to navigate asking your manager for more money to what you should be looking for before signing a new employment contract. There will be time for a Q&A and also be led by 2 wonderful women, Jillian Climie, who has spent her career in executive compensation, and Sophie Warwick, who specializes in developing in-house gender equity policies and chairing employee resource groups. And the other upcoming event, I will ask Ann Pearson, one of our panelists, to share about.
Yes, upcoming November 9th to 12th is the annual Vancouver Architecture and Design Film Festival. I am one of the co-producers of the festival. Tickets are on sale now at adfilmfest.com. We have a big opening night party at the Hollywood Theatre in Vancouver on November 9th. With some architects from New York called Low Tech. The film is about upcycling shipping containers and industrial waste. It's got a great environmental message. And then we have other great films running the rest of the weekend at the VIF Theatre on the Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. It's the long weekend, Remembrance Day. It will be raining, so what better to do than sit in a cozy movie theater and watch films on architecture and design? And as well, Women in Architecture has a swag of free tickets to give away. So make sure to follow Wia on Instagram in the coming weeks to win free tickets to the festival.
Great. Thanks, Anne. Okay, so for tonight's event, just a little bit of history on the event. We organize it every year featuring women working in and around the field of architecture. There are many directions one can take with one's career following an architectural education, and each panelist will do a brief presentation for us on the paths that they have taken. So I will now introduce our first panelist, which is Mona. She's currently an associate and senior sustainability consultant at DIALOG.
Great, thank you. I'm happy to be joining such a great group of panelists and speaking to all of you. I'm going to share my screen. So we have the awkward, oops, from the beginning. And still trying to share, bear with me a moment. Okay, are you seeing the correct screen?
Looks great, Mona.
Great, thank you. Going to move some stuff along. So we were asked to provide a brief history of our work experience and how that led us to our current career situation, and leaving some thoughts about what I imagine might lead me to in the future. So I have, here's my career path. It's a straight line, but I probably should have made a curvy line. It wasn't necessarily a super straight line. I've kind of broken it out into 4 different buckets of experience. I had my education and travel, and then I practiced architecture, and then I worked in the sustainability nonprofit sector, and now I'm a sustainability consultant. So I'll walk you slowly through a little bit of that. They're kind of generally the same timeline. The education and travel one is maybe a little bit longer than the other ones. But it was fun kind of preparing through this. I went back through my school book of treasures, and I didn't always want to be an architect. In fact, an accountant showed up the most consistently until about grade 10. Along with, or something that makes a lot of money. And so becoming an architect didn't show up actually until grade 11, and it was a very rational decision. I love to draw, and I liked that architecture would require technical and business knowledge and lifelong learning. And so variety was guaranteed, as every project and client would offer a new problem to solve. And so through my education, I completed 2 degrees, both from the University of Manitoba, where I'm originally from. I grew up in a small town south of Winnipeg and moved to Winnipeg in my teens. But I was also drawn to travel and adventure. And there's a quote from Saint-Antoine-Exupéry that I really like. Les vrais voyageurs sont ceux qui partent pour partir. The real travelers are those who leave just to leave. And so my education was definitely punctuated with travel, rationalized by the fact that now is the time to do it. I'm young with flexibility in my responsibilities. So it started right after high school. I did an exchange program. I lived with a family in Caracas, Venezuela, and fully immersed myself in language and culture for a year, traveled throughout most of the country, learned to scuba dive, became fluent in Spanish, managed to hang on to that. I kind of have to think carefully about finding my words, but I'm working on maintaining it. I'm still in touch with family and friends out there, and some of them have even reappeared as professional connections. So it's truly a small world. That year had a big impact on me and my outlook on life. And in fact, I was not accepted in the architecture program my first year back, and seriously considered a career in cultural anthropology. I decided not to pursue that because it was going to take me 7 years. So clearly I had not done my research on how long it would take to become an architect. I was eventually accepted in architecture. I completed a Bachelor of Environmental Design and a Master of Architecture. And that was, in between that, I spent 3 years teaching in Japan. And so I lived and worked in Japan for 3 years, and picked up some hobbies. I did some extensive travel. I learned Japanese pottery. On Friday nights, I did Japanese flower arranging, and I earned myself a couple of certificates. And just before leaving, I actually got into Aikido, which is a really interesting martial art that I have not gotten back into, but I'm really glad I had the opportunity to learn the philosophy when I was there. So I mentioned I did a lot of traveling, probably not as much as some, but I was still happy to have done what I did while I was there. And then finally came back to finish my to start and finish my Master of Architecture. And I did manage to insert one more trip. Before life kicked in, we had foreign studios at the University of Manitoba, so I was able to do 3 months in Chile. So now we come back to architecture. I finally graduated from my Master of Architecture and I started working, and most of my career in architecture proper was spent in Winnipeg, and these are the different firms that I worked for. And as I was preparing for this presentation and looking back on the work that I'd done, I kind of paused on this project that I worked on. This was a project called Pocket Suites. And it was a project that I was able to work from almost the beginning of design through to the end of CA. So it kind of holds a special spot because I hadn't really had the opportunity yet to do that from start to finish on a project. And so it provides these buildings. There are 4 of them in Winnipeg. And they provide people unlimited incomes with modern, compact, private apartments that fit comfortably into the existing neighborhoods. And so here you can see, the roof lines align with the neighborhood, but these are infill lots. And so there are 8 units in each building. They're tiny. They're 220 square foot units built near public transit and public amenities. And every person had their own individual entrance and windows. And so it was challenging to include kitchens and bathrooms into the small spaces. The construction budget was limited, and obtaining permits for non-traditional housing at the time was also difficult. And so it was great fun to work on that project, and it won a handful of awards as well, which was always rewarding. And so here you can see from the underside of the upper levels to the second level entrance. Here you can see some of the side elevations of the project. And then here again, the second floor decks, they're hung actually from the roof structure so that the entries below were free of obstructions and open to view. And then we were also had the ability to do some detailing to cover some downspouts to make sure that the entrances, the water was taken away from the entries. And so here you can see some of the layouts. So down here you can see the accessible unit that was designed, and then as well as the other units. So that's just one project that I decided to focus on. And then life was taking me to a new province, to British Columbia. And I had spent a great deal of time while practicing architecture and earning my intern hours in Manitoba, volunteering. I've volunteered throughout the years since I was 16 years old, but this is where my interest really started in sustainability. And so with a group of people in Manitoba, we started the first Manitoba chapter of the Canada Green Building Council. And it was the first chapter in Canada. So we kind of paved the way for other chapters across the country. And so when I was contemplating moving out to British Columbia, which I considered the mecca of green building, I thought, why not explore employment opportunities to get paid to do the work I volunteer for? I was kind of tired of just the busyness of working in small firms, and I for many years, I called it, I defected from architecture and I accepted a position with a nonprofit organization called, at the time it was Cascadia Green Building Council, and eventually grew to become the International Living Future Institute. So I spent a number of years in that organization, growing in responsibilities, starting as the BC director for Cascadia, and eventually becoming the executive director of the organization and the vice president of the International Organization of Education and Events. And so I spent a number of years, being the go-to person where people came to learn more about green building, and to expand their knowledge and their abilities. And so it was a really great time. Everybody came to you because they were convinced that sustainability was the right thing to do, and they wanted to learn more and how to apply it to their projects. And so a big part of what I did when I was there was producing and curating Living Future, which is their signatory event. And so I, shortly after I got to British Columbia, I hosted the first, well, it was their second one, but the first one in Vancouver. And so that was in 2008. And after that, I produced and curated 4 more of the conferences. The first conference was 150 people with only people from the Pacific Northwest. And by the time I left the organization, it had grown into an event, from a 1.5-day event to a 3 to 4 day event with 1,200 people from all over the world. So, and I think my favorite one was Women Reshaping the World. And so that was a great one, although our children's cities was also a really great one. That one was in Vancouver. And so that was a really rewarding kind of piece of my career. And then I decided that I missed architecture, and I missed kind of working in more directly into the built environment. And so I came back to architectural practice, and I finally got registered. It took me 15 years, but I finally, we were talking about this before the session started, just about, I wanted to finish what I started. It was hanging over me. I wanted to say that I was an architect, but I didn't necessarily want to practice architecture in the same way as I had done at the beginning of my career. And so this is where I was able to merge a career in architecture and a career in sustainability nonprofit to become a sustainability consultant. And so I've had the opportunity to work at a few firms here in British Columbia and in Washington State. And I am now the sustainable design lead at DIALOG. And I work across the practice. We have a team of sustainability consultants. We also have a team of building performance, a building performance team, and we work across disciplines and across projects to incorporate sustainability goals into a project. And also really exciting for me is DIALOG recently became a certified B Corp. And so we're learning how to incorporate that into our daily practice more and more. I haven't stopped volunteering. The only time I stopped volunteering was when I was working for the nonprofit sector. So I felt like I was doing the work that I would otherwise volunteer for. Now I'm back into the world of volunteering in addition to the work that I do every day at DIALOG. And I'm a volunteer with the RAIC. This is something that I've been doing since I came back to architectural practice. And I am chair of the Committee on Regenerative Environments for the RAIC. And we've been doing a lot of great work. We have a lot of volunteers. Our most exciting project recently, after in 2019, the RAIC approved in principle the resolution for urgent and sustained climate action on climate and ecological health, we are now working on the RAIC's Climate Action Engagement and Enablement Plan. And so we've hosted a number of events since 2019 focused on climate action, and I've got a few links to share with you at the end. But right now we've been engaging with with the profession, with other disciplines as well, to help shape the RAIC's Climate Action Plan that's been happening since April to November of 2023. And that will culminate into a climate action plan that will continue to grow and evolve as we learn more about the work that we need to do. And so one of the events that I wanted to share with all of you that we hosted, because we're talking about career paths in architecture, is one of 4 podcasts on architecture that we had in 2021. And this was a podcast with Harriet Harris, and she was one of the editors on this book, Architects After Architecture, which I'm still working my way through. But I thought it might be of interest to all of you. You know, what can you do with a degree in architecture, and where can it take you? What kind of challenges can you address? And so in this book, they reframe architecture as a uniquely versatile way of acting on the world, far beyond that of designing buildings. So they meet 40 practitioners who've used their architectural training in new and resourceful ways. And so it might be an interesting resource. And so with all of that, I can't see anybody anymore. I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Mona.
And pass it on to the next person.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mona. That was wonderful. So interesting to hear your story. Okay, our next speaker is Bao, and she is Director of Architecture at McKinley Studios.
Yeah, thanks, Sally. Thanks so much, Mona. That was really inspiring. All right, I'm going to screen share and get the right screen here. And Sally, maybe just confirm once you see my screen.
Yes, I can see your screen.
Great. All right, I'll start in. So as Sally said, I'm the director of Architecture Studio at McKinley Studios, and I am based in the Calgary office. We actually have a couple of offices, one in Vancouver, one in Calgary. I travel quite a bit back and forth, but I am based in Calgary. We're an interesting kind of architecture firm where we're actually fairly multidisciplinary. So we kind of work within the realms of architecture, interior design, brand, procurement, furniture procurement, art, and creative strategy. This is what you're looking at here is actually a retrospective show that we did for our various studios, the work that, you know, celebrating our work for the year at the end of last year. And it's an exhibit that we held in our Calgary art gallery. We have 2 art galleries, one in each city attached to our office space. So I'll kind of dig in and I'll kind of start with training. And I think the focus of the conversation for me is really kind of, you know, how did I choose my path? I don't think it was very obvious to me. I think I just chose it based on the things I liked doing. And so I'll pull out those threads, but really the first thing for me was really about making. As I was beginning to think about studying my bachelor's, what I knew is that I really liked making. This is a great shot that I love. It's our Maker Lab space, or we have access to the Maker Lab space in Vancouver. This is James. He's currently actually studying in Switzerland for industrial design, but he's working at the CNC machine, making some study, some architectural model or some kind of study of some sort, which is something that we do all the time. And it's actually kind of how I like to work as well. So, you know, making was a really big piece of the decision to actually start with a fine arts degree. So I studied at Concordia University in Montreal, and I did a kind of double degree in the studio arts and art history. And I think that double degree was really impactful for me because I really liked the making aspect, but I also really liked the research and the history aspect, and this kind of merging of theory, making theory and context. This is one of my favorite pieces, is Jenny Holzer back in the 80s. It's, you know, her big Protect Me from What I Want billboard in Times Square. And this was up in my studio at art school, was up in my studio in architecture school. But it, for me, was a great example. And this is kind of what I learned in art school. Was what I was interested in was art or design or the creation of culture that tied back to a larger historical or social context. And so that has always, that kind of formed in art school and has been with me ever since, this kind of idea of participating for really relevant work, to remain relevant, that it participates in the larger conversation. So with that, I kind of, you know, art school's art school, like you're just like kind of mucking around. I did a lot of things. I tried a lot of things. I worked, I did, you know, this is an example of a journal that I art directed and was kind of assistant editor on at McGill. But predominantly my medium was woodwork and metalwork. And the format was often kind of installation work, which began to bleed into spatial design ultimately. What I did, you know, at the end of my 4 years in Montreal, I chose that school because I was like, why not? Like, I'm from Calgary. I'm gonna, you know, explore the world, explore the country. I'm gonna fly across the country and learn about Quebec, what it's like to live there. I ended up loving school, and I thought, I'm gonna be an academic forever. I'm never gonna enter the working world. I love the research. I love the making. I love the conversations. And so I definitely, you know, and of course, at the end of it, though, I literally had a 4-year degree in basket weaving, as you can see. So it was slightly terrifying. So I decided to pursue a master's, and the decision for me was between a master's of fine arts or a master's of architecture. Back to that Jenny Holzer piece and this kind of thought around participation in a larger conversation and around kind of tying back to larger context. I ended up pursuing a master's of architecture at the University of Toronto. And in so doing, I think what I really did was I invested in my other great love, which is a love of arguing. And I don't mean that in a, like, you know, a derogatory way. I think what we learn in our architectural training is to posit a thesis, to set up parameters with which to assess an idea and to test an idea, and how to argue for that idea. And I think that is one of the big takeaways for me in my architecture training. So this is me at the University of Toronto back before, I think it was the Daniels faculty, and this is me defending my thesis, you know, arguing for my life. But what I also learned at U of T at that time, I think was really interesting, is that it was actually transitioning. It was transitioning from the 5-year B.Arch degree to the M.Arch degree. George Baird was returning, and who has actually just announced that he had passed away yesterday. But he, and it was really impactful in kind of this transition for the school. He was returning as dean from having taught at Harvard. So he's really looking to shape and form the school in a different way. You know, a lot of the faculty were young; they were coming from Harvard, and what I learned was that it's not really about who they were, but that there's an energy around when an institution or in a company or when a group is in transition. It's a very exciting time to be involved, and not only that, but if you are at that place at that time, it means that you can also impact and shape the conversation. that learning has stuck with me as I move forward. So end of the 4-year degree in Toronto, really competitive space, really hard to get a job. And one of my profs said to the class, like, yeah, if you want a job, if you want to get in the door, you got to volunteer your time, which just did not make any sense to me. Having massive amounts of student loans, as we all do, it just did not make sense to me. So oddly enough, that basket weaving degree became useful. So I thought, well, maybe I'll just kind of work contract. I'll kind of just dabble in all these various things that I like to do. So I went back or kind of dipped my toes back into the art world, and I ended up meeting a gallerist who was looking for additional help and support. He had been trained at Sotheby's in the valuation of art. And I found that really interesting because I was like, how many people are you going to run into who are going to be trained at Sotheby's in London and know about how to talk about art, know how to value it, and know how to sell it? So I just thought that was an opportunity. It was a surprise opportunity, but I kind of ran with it. But in so doing, what I actually leaned back into was one of those things that was introduced to me at my bachelor's, which is my love of researching. So, working with a gallerist and working with a gallery, we did the basic things like curate exhibitions, but more interestingly, we developed a kind of series of initiatives. And so the gallery was actually an international. It focused on international artists and with a real focus on up and coming artists. So there was a lot of research involved around what schools are producing what artists. And there's obviously the kind of big famous ones, but what about all the other ones? And so a lot of research involved. And what we started to find was that China was producing some really interesting artists at the time. I'm not going to tell you the year because it's going to age me, but it was really interesting that the schools were teaching techniques, painting techniques that were no longer we weren't really seeing them in Europe and North America because art schools in Europe and North America were turning to theory. But in Asia, they were teaching like truly, techniques in a kind of old school way. And what those artists were doing is that they were using this really incredible, masterful techniques and telling the stories of what life was like within that context. So we ended up becoming art scouts and traveling quite a bit through China to work with the schools, meet new artists, and in so doing, I kind of learned the art of the pitch. The pitch is we're always pitching. That's what a defense is. That's what a thesis defense is. But this was different. It was about developing a relationship with artists, developing trust, convincing them to part with their artwork, allowing us to ship it across the world to Toronto. And then of course, pitching it to a buyer and trying to convince a buyer to part with $50,000 for a painting because because of the quality, because of the potential of the artist. So these were some really interesting skill sets I hadn't anticipated developing after my art degree and after my architecture degree. But in addition to that, I was a little restless and I probably wasn't making all that much money. I was kind of, again, contracting with some architects, doing some studies, doing some plans, working with the gallerist. But felt like, okay, like this is great. I have a lot of flexibility, but I don't have that much money in Toronto and I've got massive student loans. So I answered an ad, again, still living in Toronto, but the ad was for a research assistant, a visual research assistant. So I was like, yes, research, I can do that. I love that. And so I ended up meeting a woman who ran a really small, super boutique book development company out of her house. And she had this beautiful Victorian home on Gladstone in Toronto. And it was her, an assistant, and myself kind of working in her home office. And it began with me researching visual imagery for book ideas, visual imagery, and then content. And then we just began to brainstorm book ideas. And what I learned is not unlike maybe a little bit of the art industry. There's standard ways of doing things, and they're all a little bit surprisingly loose, I guess. So we would sit around and brainstorm the idea for books and say, what would a museum of the history of Canada look like in a book? And we would develop the concept, begin to kind of research the imagery. We might even not have an author. We might have to find the author, might have to find the people to write the foreword. We would pull together book concepts like the Museum of Canada. This one was a retrospective. This one we didn't have to brainstorm. This is a retrospective book for Diamond Schmidt. Again, so working across different sectors and different areas of content. This is a cookbook for Chef Suser Lee. And so some of these were books that were going to get published regardless, just because of the namesake. But what I discovered is, just like pitching for art, in the publishing world, you have to pitch for books too. So, we would develop these book concepts. We would come up with these mock-ups. We would, get a graphic designer to do a cover, do a table of contents, and head off to the Frankfurt Book Fair to look for a publisher to pick it up. So, this is kind of, at the time, I didn't really know where this would take me. I was kind of just doing this because I couldn't find a job in architecture. And I didn't want to grovel. I was like, I'm not going to do that. But I'm also working a little bit in architecture. And at a certain point in my life, I realized, well, I either, got to commit to architecture, because if I want to become registered, it's, as Mona said, it's a path, right? It's a commitment of time. And so I really enjoyed dabbling in all of these different disciplines. And I don't think I was an expert in any of them. I think I just kind of peeked behind the curtain. But my takeaways were internalized. And I don't think I really knew what I was learning at the time. But what it did tell me was, okay, if there is a business component to everything, to culture, just really, there is a business to culture, no matter what the medium is. And so I decided, again, just to focus on architecture, and decided to kind of commit to that full time. I knew a lot of female architects who were very free with the kind of recommendation, like, if you think you want to become a registered architect, do it before you have a family. Just make sure you get registered before you have that first kid. So that was kind of like in the back of my mind. And so that's what I decided to kind of more fulsomely pursue. And so that kind of brings me back to McKinley Studios. Truthfully, I kind of worked with a variety of firms, a variety of different scales, one-man shows, two-man shows, big corporate firms. I've been with McKinley for nearly 14 years now, actually, and 7 of those in the director's seat. I think that learning that I had at U of T around, finding the right, finding an organization that is growing and shaping itself is a really great opportunity if you're interested in shaping something. And so McKinley was truly, just for me, initially an architecture firm, but what it has become over time is actually a creative collective. So again, kind of, we do architecture, we do interior design, we curate and consult around art, we do furniture fabrication and procurement, we do brands, some of you guys might recognize, the AIBC brand that our team developed, and we do creative strategy and consulting. So, I think the takeaway for me is, you might have really tangential components around your path, but they can all lead to something still in architecture. At least for me, my daily focus is architecture, but it's with a group that allows all my other interests to to survive and to still be fed. So I didn't have to abandon the art. I didn't have to abandon the research. I didn't have to abandon the kind of written component. So then again, this is a bit of the snapshot of what we do today. What I think my future will continue to look pretty multidisciplinary ultimately, because this is what's exciting to me. I love architecture, but I love it in relationship to a larger context of culture and culture making ultimately. So, and I don't know how long this reel goes for, but I will stop. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bao. Very exciting journey and interdisciplinary story. Wonderful. Our next speaker, and don't worry everyone, we'll have time for questions after. I'm sure everyone has been brewing up their questions already. So our next speaker is Anne. She is the owner of the Vancouver Special Design Store and co-producer of the Architecture and Design Film Festival in Vancouver. So take it away, Anne.
Thank you, Sally. Okay, I'm going to share my screen and just let me know if it comes up for you.
I can see your screen. Looks like you're ready to go.
Ready to go?
Yeah.
Great. I would just like to start by recognizing that I am an uninvited guest living and working on the unceded stolen land of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples, which they have stewarded since time immemorial. I also want to recognize that I grew up in the Treaty 6 and Métis territory in Edmonton, Alberta. I think that I would loosely call myself a design advocate. I own a design shop. I also co-produce a film festival. I opened the Store Vancouver Special in 2008, and I am now in my 15th year of the adventure that is being the owner-operator of a family-owned independent business in Vancouver. But before going into the story of the shop, I wanted to go back to 2006, which is when I graduated from the School of Architecture at UBC. So this is me and my friends at graduation when we were fresh-eyed and optimistic that design could change the world. Looking back, I knew even when I was in school that I wasn't going to be an architect. I didn't know what my career trajectory was going to be, but I certainly knew that I didn't like computers, drafting, or my building technology classes. My favorite courses were always history and theory, in addition to the studies abroad trips that I'd taken to Cuba and Japan and Europe. I was very lucky because I took many studios with the best professor I could have had, who was Patricia Patkow. But the problem was that even though I loved school and I had this incredibly strong female mentor, I actually didn't have any role models who had children and an architectural career. And I did know in my mid to late 20s that I wanted to have a family. And I couldn't see how that was possible by working at a firm and trying to get registered before my biological clock stopped cooperating. So this is a photo of my thesis project model. We can all see that I really wasn't cut out to be an architect. I actually had Marty Fujita on my thesis committee, and even she couldn't help me and agreed that model making was not my forte. So after finishing school, and while I was trying to figure out what my next step in my career was going to be, I decided to go try architecture. So I got a job at a large local firm that does a lot of residential towers and developer-driven condos. And I was deeply unhappy. I didn't go to school to crank out repetitive floor plans and squeeze as many sellable square feet as I could just to line the pockets of a wealthy developer and to make bedrooms too small to hold most beds. Looking back, that was a pivotal experience because it confirmed exactly what I didn't want to do with my architecture degree. And it was great, actually, because it lit a fire under me to find something that I was more suited to, which was a career that was more social, more creative, and more curatorial. This is a photo of my grandfather's storefront in Edmonton in the 1940s. He co-founded a company called Taylor Pearson. It started off as an automotive parts wholesaler and retailer. They also had a machine shop on site, and they made custom parts. This family history was very much an inspiration for me, as he ended up getting into selling everything from radios to washing machines to cameras. He was the first dealer in Canada to sell Canon cameras. I also come from a long line of entrepreneurs and small business owners. Like my dad owned his own business, as did his father, as did his grandfather. So ever since I can remember, I loved three things: traveling, art museums, and shopping. So like Bao, I have an undergrad in art history, actually with a double major in film studies. And the thing that I love to do when I'm traveling to new cities is to see what's being sold in all the cool shops, in the museum stores. And this is the shop at the Louisiana Museum, which is just outside of Copenhagen. Now, I would argue that this is the best museum in the world, and it is also the best design store as well, museum design store. It carries all the top Danish furniture brands, accessories, posters for all of the museum's collection. We actually sell the posters from Louisiana in my store, as well as books and housewares. There are so many examples of great design shops like this in the world. For example, on the left is, actually both slides, is the department store Illem's, which is in Copenhagen. It's like the mecca of Scandinavian design. In my travels, I have come across stores like this and always wondered, why doesn't Vancouver have this? When I was in school, I went on a studies abroad trip to Germany, and that was a major turning point in how I thought about design and how I was going to maybe use my education. So we visited the Vitra campus, and I knew this was somehow informing my future. It's like the other mecca for architects. And now I actually sell Vitra in my shop, so it feels like it's coming full circle. There was a specific moment I recall when some friends and I were walking through Hackesche Market in Berlin, and we came across a small design shop that was selling like a mix of architecture books, stationery, furniture, and I got really excited, and I was taking lots of photos, and I was thinking to myself, like, I could do this. And at that point, while I was still in school, I started making lists of furniture brands, accessory brands, cool products, well-packaged products that were not available in Vancouver that I thought I could source. And every time I saw something in a magazine or online that caught my eye, I would just add it to my list. Vancouver only had IKEA and the two super high-end Italian furniture shops and nothing in between. So in the fall of 2007, I quit my job, and with a big leap of faith and a bigger line of credit from the bank, I went looking for a retail space. So I found this space on Main and 20th. It was a Chinese acupuncture and traditional medicine clinic. It required a serious reno, and this became my first real design project. I did all of the drawings, the permits, and managed the construction over 4 or 5 long months. This is the inside of what it used to look like. And you can see that there's that T-bar drop ceiling and that funny little loft upstairs. And we tore it up and discovered that actually there was an 18-foot ceiling in this space, which is exactly what I needed to sell furniture. This is midway through construction. You can see that we had the stair there, revealed the loft. This is my dad. He's chipping away at this horrible Health Canada tile that was in the space. And there was actually a pretty decent concrete floor underneath. We replaced the front windows with this nice big storefront glazing. And then in April 2008, the financial crisis hit. And at that exact same time, I was ready to open my store. I ordered a 20-foot container of furniture from Denmark, and I started Vancouver Special. I chose the name because it refers to the residential typology that's highly prevalent in the surrounding neighborhood, but also because I'm really trying to do something that's special for Vancouver. So now I'm selling about 80 to 90% Danish furniture and accessories with a few local lines, and also some Japanese glassware, textiles, and ceramics. The Scandinavians believe that good design should be simple, useful, affordable, colorful, and bring joy to daily life. And that's essentially my manifesto for the shop, and something I always look for when I'm choosing products. I want to educate people about the importance of design. I want to educate people about the dangers of knockoffs, the dangers of fire retardants, of PBDEs, of stain retardants on chemicals on your fabrics that are used in furniture that is made all over Asia. Therefore, all of the upholstered furniture that I sell in my shop is made in Denmark in a sustainable factory where the people make living wages and in a country that has the highest export regulations for all chemical components of any country in the world. Sustainability is incredibly important to me. And unlike Article and Rove and these other companies that are making cheap furniture made in Asia, I refuse to sell anything that is made by children or unpaid workers that's just going to end up in a landfill in 2 years. If the chairs that someone buys at my shop end up lasting a lifetime and getting passed down to their kids, then my job is done. I'm happy. But I also feel very strongly that we need to pay our staff living wages because living in Vancouver is incredibly expensive. So here's a few more images of the store. It was half the size. Originally, we expanded in 2013. I have an amazing selection of art, architecture, and photography books. I would love to actually just sell books, but because of Amazon, I can't actually make a living just being a bookstore. So I'm supplementing with furniture. This is another photo of my dad and my daughter, Ellie. And I had my daughter right around the time that we expanded into the neighboring space. And that was a really stressful year. And one thing I've learned is how lucky I am now at the age of 46 that I decided to do this when I was 30. I'm so thankful that the young me was so brave and entrepreneurial and naive so that I am now in a very fortunate position of being my own boss because I'm now a single parent to a 12-year-old. And for her entire life, I've been able to leave the store if I need to at 3 p.m. to pick her up from school or take the day off if she gets sick or has a pro D day. I also want to mention that I did not do this alone. I have a very supportive family, and I couldn't have done it without my dad, who's been doing my bookkeeping for me for the last 15 years. So it's very much a family business. So I also wanted the shop to be much more than strictly retail. I wanted it to act as a social hub for architects and designers. So I got together with some architect friends to start a lecture series that was called Party for Architects. Every few months, we would invite a local up-and-coming architect or firm to present their work and their process in the store as a chance for designers to drink beer together, to encourage dialogue around design, to network, to get people out of their offices and discuss what they've been doing with like-minded designers. Some notable guests have been Darcy Jones and Barbara Bester. Barbara is actually one of the few females on the West Coast who runs a large architecture firm and also has kids. I think role models like Barbara like this are really important. Otherwise, it's hard to imagine yourself in the profession. So that's one of the reasons I love doing these types of events with female architects is because it creates more visibility, especially for people who are in school or intern architects. So in addition to running the shop and being a mom and hosting events, I also do reviews at Sala. And for a couple of years, I co-taught a class at Emily Carr in the industrial design program there, ran a class called Design Make. These are a couple of the projects that resulted from the Design Make courses that I was teaching. And then in 2021, I had the amazing opportunity to do a pop-up shop at the Polygon Gallery. And this is a beautiful art gallery in North Van and Lonsdale that was designed by Paco Architects. So that also kind of brought everything full circle to have a pop-up shop in a building designed by my mentor, Patricia, but also to have a museum store, which was always my dream. So that was really a wonderful experience for me to do the Polygon pop-up. An architectural education provides you with the skills you need to design almost anything. And to loosely quote the Canadian designer Bruce Mao, the most important thing to design is actually your own life. There's an incredible documentary called Mao that I encourage everyone to watch. I think it's on Apple. And there's a corresponding book called MC4 that's available at my shop. So just a few more slides to go. These are my parents and myself hanging out at the Stockholm Furniture Fair. This is right before COVID hit. I have to say that traveling is still my #1 source of inspiration and a great perk of my job. I remember my parents and I sitting down for lunch that day and looking around and literally pinching ourselves because we had just seen the most incredible furniture. We'd done some deals with some new furniture brands that were also family-owned businesses. And we'd had great conversations where we just saw eye to eye with our values about manufacturing, about materials and sustainability. And it just felt so right. And I remember saying to my mom, this does not even feel like work. I want to be doing this, even if it wasn't my job. And you can see here in my face, I'm just having like the best time ever. So in addition to running the shop, I also have this side passion project, which I've been doing for 5 years now, which is running the Vancouver version of ADFF, the Architecture and Design Film Festival. The festival was started in New York 15 years ago, and I produce the local festival every November with my friend Leah Mallon. This is a photo of Mari, Fujita, and myself and my mom at the festival together. And these are some photos of myself and my 2 heroes. On the left, landscape architect Cornelia Oberlander, and on the right, Indigenous architect Douglas Cardinal. Both have been guests at ADFF. The festival really allows me to use my love and knowledge of architecture and my party planning skills from Party for Architects on a much larger scale. It also allows me to use the shop as a jumping off point to engage more deeply with the public and to do what I really care about, which is to educate them further about the importance of design, but through the medium of film. So I'm going to play for you now a little teaser for the festival, which is coming up November 9th to 12th. This is actually a teaser from last year, because the one for this year isn't quite finished yet. So just in closing, I wanted to say that there are a myriad of careers post-architecture that don't involve pumping CAD or selling your soul to a developer. I am only one example of my classmates who have forged something different, from people working in the film industry to photography, animation, academia, publishing. The great thing about a design education is that it prepares you for all of those possibilities and more. Every detour you take is part of the process. I thank my architectural education all the time for my skill set, my ability to defend my opinions and my aesthetic, to think visually and laterally and across many problems and disciplines, to be creative and an effective manager, not only in my own time, but of my team. And honestly, there isn't a day that goes by where I ever wish that I had done an MBA instead of an architecture degree, because it's actually a great degree to prepare you for being in business and for also being a creative community organizer. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anne, for the presentation. I just want to say I absolutely love your store. And been to Copenhagen, and I totally saw the connection. So next up, we have our final presenter, Mari, and she is an associate professor at UBC School of Architecture and Landscape Architecture, and principal at Fuba Labo Design Corps. So Mari, take it away.
Hello, everyone. First of all, to the WIA organizers, thank you so much for inviting me. I've actually always been curious about your group and just never made it to an event. So really happy to be here. And to Mona and Bao and Anne, thanks for your presentations. They're all really, really wonderful and so beautiful to hear all of you reflect on your amazing careers. I'm currently in my office at Sala, which is on the unceded stolen territory of the Musqueam people. And as a first generation immigrant to Canada of Japanese and Italian American origin, and in my roles as a designer and an educator, I commit to listening, learning, unlearning through these roles so that we can move forward in next generations, decolonize our practice as designers and makers in the built environment. So with that, I was listening to other presentations and realized I didn't reflect as much as I maybe could have, or I would like to. So I'll try to add that into the slides. But a little bit about me. Just as my ugly timeline, I just punched this in an hour ago. I have a BA in art history and architecture. So I have a dual degree, and so we have an art history like contingent here. I practiced in New York City, and also I lived and worked in Berlin for 2 years. I have an MArch from Princeton University, and I graduated. Actually, I had met George Wagner in Berlin between my degrees. He edited the monograph of the firm I was working for, Barco Leibinger. And so George Wagner is a professor emeritus from here at UBC. And so he said, if you ever want a job, look me up, a teaching job, look me up, and come to Vancouver. It's really beautiful there. And so I was graduating my master's, and I had practiced in a wide variety of firms in, like I said, New York and Berlin, and really wanted to have my own practice and also be in kind of academic realm. I just loved school. I was like a super TA as a grad student. I TA'd like a studio every semester. I TA'd history theory, et cetera, et cetera. So I was just really, really comfortable in that space. And so, yeah, I went directly from, graduating in June with a master's to becoming an adjunct in September at Sala, just driving across the country, or the continent and the country. I was hired in a full-time position as assistant professor 2005. And then at the very end of my tenure track, had a baby, and then went up for tenure, became an associate professor. And I also have a role in the administration as a program chair of the undergraduate program. I have my own practice together with my partner, Michael Barton. We are called Fubalabo, and we have a product design company within that called Maiku Brando. And so those are all kind of like when that was launched in the time frame. Oops, sorry. I should keep it full screen. So I'll maybe refer to some of that as I move through the slides. But I imagine that most of you here are here because you are practicing architects, but perhaps curious about the things. So Anne's amazing story about realizing that drawing those plans wasn't as satisfying as it could have been, and the bravery to leave. For me, I just have always, like I said, loved school. I love ideas. I love just asking what if, having silly ideas, hard ideas, and so on. And I love being part of those conversations. And so being in academia, which is another track, just allows me to do that every day. And I keep learning every year. I learn new things. And so I'm really, really grateful for that. And so just a little bit of what that looks like. Here is the final review of a MArch vertical studio. I taught on post-colonial urbanism in Kuala Lumpur, where I actually lived for a year at some point. I teach in the undergrad, so this is a 4th year studio on urban acupuncture. Yeah, I have lots of fun teaching. This is a 2-sided drawing a student made. So you can see it's a frame, and the drawing has a front and a back, and you rotate it. There's a video of that. I have taught studies abroad to different countries, most recently to Japan. So here's some images of what it looks like. and I teach some design build at our school. We have multiple design build programs. So this is a project in partnership with the Pell Street Festival Society. It's a kind of Japanese-Canadian nonprofit organization that runs a really big, amazing festival. And so our students entered a competition that I wrote the brief for and then assembled a jury for, and the winning entry was given the budget and the time and space to build this, which is the macromaki, maybe familiar to many of you. But yeah, you wear a costume, and then this is these are like giant ohashi, giant chopsticks with a camera on top, and they take pictures from above that look kind of like this. Very adorable little like sushi constellation platters. There was a couple other installations. This recent one from last summer had to do with kind of responding to the water crisis in the downtown east side, and the kind of the lack of water and the heat dome and COVID and people unable to clean themselves. So the students were really interested in thinking about kind of climate control and climate relief, and through this misting stations and these kind of watering stations. And they're just really, really playful ways to kind of distribute water and cooling. And as chair, I oversee the curriculum of the undergrad, oversee the hiring of adjuncts, these kinds of things, and then run events like this is welcoming the students this semester, all the incoming students into our program. So we built sandcastles for animals on the beach, and they got really creative, and then the tide came in. So we were like, it was like the TV show. We're like, we can do this. Okay, next one. We'll give you like, present to us. Okay, good. Like the water's coming to the moat, it's working. So that was that. I spent a lot of time in space that looked like this. Maybe this is familiar to many of you, but this is our undergraduate studio spaces and our kind of maker spaces. And the students clean up, wash their hair, build, and then present their like amazing creation. So here's a 4th year undergrad. I love this student. She's a 4th year now in our program, and her 2nd year project from a year and a half ago, where she obviously matched her project. Just a little bit. So as an academic, there's a teaching component, there's all that, and then there's a research component too. So I personally look at contemporary urbanism, and I'm just gonna skip through this, but have researched things like themed, the rise of the middle class, and like kind of different ways to think about developments in urbanism in kind of newly industrialized countries. So this is like these themed towns in China, looking at kind of just the fragility of kind of more traditional neighborhoods. This is in the center of Kuala Lumpur, and just thinking about how that will change with all the kind of new money coming in, or that was coming in at the time I wrote the article. More playful pieces, collaborating with a colleague, thinking about ecology in the city, publishing a book about Vancouver organized by its materials, and more recently thinking about tourism and kind of shrinking cities and finances of that, and how tourism is kind of coming in, especially in a place like Japan. So they're just like really amazing stats that in Japan, tourism has doubled in 5 years, from about 20 million to 40 million, due to a program to increase tourism. So everyone that's gone to Japan in the last 5 or 8 years is part of that doubling of the number. But the population is shrinking. And so there are places like this. This is an island that has a population of under 20 people on it, lots of abandoned houses, but it's the site of this, festival and these installations. And I'm really interested in that conflict and that, or the tension, I would say. So some projects like this, and this is my daughter. We're getting when she was younger, and but you know, this is on the first island I showed in Ujima, and here's a bench that is dilapidated. And so instead of fixing it, the architect put in 2 of her chairs. It didn't, just left the old fence. I'm not quite sure if there's supposed to be a dialogue there, or just like this kind of ignoring that, and ignoring the real need of a place like this. So and research, like it's really fun being in a university. I collaborate with people across different departments. So I've been kind of ongoing project with people in Asian studies, looking at Japanese maps. This is one for all the architects that's 2D that becomes 3D, and it's a Mount Fuji. And I think finally in this section, I have a kind of research project that looks at teaching engagement. And so if you are teaching design to students, like how do we also think about what it means to engage people, so that we kind of remember, number one, who we're designing for, and don't perpetuate the harm, kind of colonial harm of just kind of imposing our own brilliant ideas. So there's this whole kind of project around engagement. There's different components, including this open source blog, where I'm kind of collecting projects that like good practices engagement. So if anyone, this is kind of a call out, if anyone has projects from your practices that you think would be good candidates, please email them to me or put them in the chat, and I would love to include them in the blog. Beyond UBC, just like really, because of the kind of freedom in my role, just try to find fun projects. This is a group that's from that was started when I moved to Vancouver, and there's like John Wall of Public was in it. Hiroj and Henning of PH5 were founding members. Annabelle Vaughn, who I think is with Rafael Santa Ana now, was also part of this group. And we were like thinking about public space in the city. You know, we were in our 30s back then, and we raised money to do this design installation in a competition that was really, really fun. Installed it at the Vancouver Art Gallery. Just kind of responding to invites. This is at the Hong Kong Shenzhen Biennale, and we were asked to kind of respond to a canonic book of architecture, and like, so our response was that this book is obnoxious and too heavy, and it should be more portable and more ecological. So we like literally took it to a book binder and had them cut it up like the original book and made new little ones. And then there's I would say more serious and more kind of on the ground work that has to do with kind of advocacy within our community. So this is a public space project that I'm involved in with the Pell Street Festival Society, and just like ultimately leading towards public space intervention that will commemorate the Japanese Canadian community within the downtown east side, but doing it through like a lot of consultation, a lot of kind of engagement and activity, gathering stories about people's relationship to the neighborhood and what are people's real needs in the neighborhood. And so this is from this summer, and we had fun. We made buttons and asked people, you probably recognize half the people in these slides, asked people their ideas for the neighborhood. Oh, sorry, I think one more project in this section is this project called Mr. It's kind of an open source project for cooler cities. So thinking about bringing misting and designing a system. So working with my partner, again, Michael Barton from Fubalabo, we were working on the kind of how low tech actually a misting can be, and trying to make a kit to give to kind of nonprofit groups that are that maybe could benefit from making a cooling space for their members of their community. So we held a workshop at Kiwasa House this summer, and kind of designed and 3D printed these little kind of tools that connect to the kind of major tubing system for like irrigation misting systems, and kind of created these graphics that are just very accessible, and kind of educated them about kind of different precedents, and then installed a mister. And hopefully this will become a project that we can kind of keep sharing and making it open source. So if you know any communities, neighborhood houses, SROs, other kinds of groups that may benefit from having a mister, we'd love to run a workshop and make this kit accessible to them. And finally, I mentioned earlier that I have a practice and also industrial product design firm called Microbrando. Our most popular product were face masks during COVID. And so here you can see kind of sense of that we won an award for. They are hand-dyed, hand silkscreen, and all produced here in Vancouver, which is actually very challenging. Another product we made was this furoshiki, which is a kind of square cloth from Japan that you can do anything with. You can wrap packages, you can pack your lunch in. I use them as kind of little tablecloths. And they are in the Vancouver Special pop-up that was at the Polygon Gallery. So here's the reverse view of Anne's photo. I think, Anne, your photograph was from this, looking at this table. So here's a reverse view of these furoshiki hanging out. And these are also, again, hand-dyed, hand sewn, everything here in Vancouver. The brief to us asked us to look forward, you know, in our careers. So kind of like where we came from, why we, you know, how we kind of took the path we took, and looking forward, I hope to keep doing what I'm doing. You know, I've a very secure job at UBC. So think about academia. Once you're tenured, you pretty much have a job for life. So it's a very secure job. But I don't want to get too comfortable in it. And so hoping just to find new challenges within that, but also maybe like people before me, we talked about Patricia Pacow as a model, you know, look at early retirement, or kind of going to like 50% for the academic job, so I could spend more time doing the making and kind of doing projects that require me to learn new things, like how to run a business and find manufacturing, which is very, very difficult in Vancouver. And so those are the things that really excite me and I look forward to doing in the future.
Great. Thank you so much, Mari. Great presentation. Loved hearing everything beyond academia in addition to your role. So we're just looking at the time here. This event was planned to go till 7:30, but if everyone is available to stick around for a little discussion, that'd be great. Please do so as you're able. And if not, feel free to drop off. But we do have some questions that have shown up over the course of the presentation. So I will pass it over to Andrea, who's going to be sharing the questions for our panelists.
Sounds good. Thanks, Sally. There is one question for Bao, but I think this could also be a good question for just people in general. They're interested to know about what advice you would give to someone who has a more technical background and wants to pursue a more design-oriented path.
Mm-hmm. You know, sometimes it's sometimes I think we imagine that our expertise is a limitation. And so, but it truly is an expertise. And so a way to think about, you know, I think the skill sets that you have and building new skill sets is to say, well, how do I leverage what I know? And how do I, you know, so if I have a really technical background, how do I leverage that into great design? And what does great design mean to me? Maybe there's a bit of that conversation, but, you know, I think, you know, some of it is just in the doing and in the being the nimble, like allowing yourself to kind of be nimble and take a bit of that leap or that risk in and knowing that sometimes you, like, you know, there's going to be a bit of a learning curve. And I think it also depends on what it is that you're looking for. Someone might be looking for in terms of like you know, if you're trying to develop new skill set, to what end? You know, is it because you enjoy it? Is it for joy? Is it because you just feel like you're lacking it? So I think there's a little bit of that kind of assessing for yourself what you know, the why, and that might help you kind of figure out the how. You know, does that mean you just do the work on the side? Like you have your own projects, you create your own projects, and you practice design outside of the professional field. Like that's kind of, I think, probably one of the ways that I would imagine. And I feel like I did that when I was kind of not working in architecture and realizing I should probably work in architecture, but I'm working in art. But so maybe I'll just like do my own projects so that you get comfortable with it. Does that help?
Definitely. I think what you said about thinking about the why, and then you'll kind of figure out the how, that really resonates with me personally, and that yeah, I think that would help a lot of people. And just to kind of, I guess, piggyback on that question as well, somebody had asked if you could share some tips on pitching and selling oneself.
Yeah, I don't know. I think in the end, you have to just be really, I think you have to fake confidence, truthfully. Like, honestly, you just have to, like, you're like kind of shaking in your boots, but you got to pretend you're not. Because I think owning, like, just projecting confidence means that you believe in the value of the thing that you're pitching. You believe in the value of this, of this design, of this book, of this piece of art, whatever it is. So I mean, I that's like a fake it till you make it line. That seems really unsatisfying, but that's the first thing that comes to mind.
I've heard that many times too, though, the fake it till you make it. Do any of the other panelists have something to add on or have a different perspective? I'm hearing something. Okay. We're going to move on to another question to Anne. Do you have any suggestions on how one could go about having a profitable architectural mercantile business and flourish?
A profitable mercantile architecture business? Okay, I'm going to scroll through the chat here so that I can read this question and make sure I answer it correctly. Is it towards the bottom?
I don't quite remember. I think it may have also been sent directly to me. So it's just as any suggestions on how one could go about having a profitable architectural mercantile business and flourish.
I wonder what an architectural mercantile business is. Can the person who asked the question unmute?
I think it's more like similar to your store, like a design-based store. That's like how I'm reading it.
How to have an architectural business that is profitable is very difficult. I'm not going to lie to anyone. Like, it is unbelievably hard work to run a small business. And I have so much respect for anybody who attempts this. And I was very naive when I was 30 to think that I could run a successful retail business. Retail in Vancouver is one of the hardest businesses you can go into. And I know architecture is very difficult as well. So I don't want to undermine anybody who's an architect who's working their butts off, because I know how hard it is to make a living as an architect too. But it's not like I chose a more profitable career than being an architect, you know? So, you know, it's like, you know, you're not going to make a lot of money doing either, right? So I'm sorry that I don't have like some like really sage advice as how to be profitable, because like if I had that, I would be doing it. But I do think that it's about cornering a market that isn't being tapped. And I think that's the key to a lot of small business success, is to find a niche that you care about, that you're good at, that isn't being already fulfilled. It's about filling those holes in the market and doing it really well. So for example, for me, I was looking for a sofa when I graduated from architecture school, and my options were Inform or IKEA. Well, obviously I have good taste and I don't want an IKEA sofa, but I obviously can't afford Inform either, right? And what's in the middle? Like, what if I've got $2 to $3 grand to spend on a sofa? Where do I go? Like, there's nowhere, right? Especially if you want something that's made in Europe. And so my brother, actually, who was living in New York at the time, he had this great sofa. And I went to go stay with him in New York, and I was sleeping on his sofa bed. And I was like, this is great. It's beautiful. Like, it was made in Denmark. Where did you get this? And he was like, oh, I got it at this cool store in Soho. So we went down to the store in Soho. I looked at the brand of that sofa. That's the brand of sofas I've been selling for 15 years. Right. So it's about finding products, finding brands, finding niches that aren't being sold in Vancouver, and just filling those gaps. I think that's how you, in my mind, you develop a successful business.
Okay, that's great advice. All right, move on. There's also a question from Mona. What specific suggestions or expertise does a sustainability consultant bring to the table? Could you please share some pointers? Is it more to do with energy efficiency or kind of working with numbers? I think they're just wanting to get an idea of what it means to be a sustainability consultant.
It can mean a lot of different things. It depends where your interests lie. Sustainability is a lot of things. It started with energy efficiency. It's now gone beyond that with LEED to be more holistic. LEED's been around for a number of years, making us look at material health. Now we're talking about embodied carbon, about where you decide to build a building, whether you decide to build a building or whether you renovate a building. That's another really exciting area that we're moving into. There's, the more mechanical side of things where you're looking at building performance and energy efficiency. Now we're talking about embodied carbon, and that's, starting. It's been around for a long time. It's been a 10 to 15 year conversation in terms of material health, which has evolved into embodied carbon. And now there's looking at, Anne was talking about, how she sources her products, knowing that it comes from, where there hasn't been any slave labor, where it's been, where the salaries are equitable. So, sustainability in the built environment is a very, very broad sort of area, and you can kind of find a way, you can find a path in a lot of different areas. Am I being specific enough or too broad? It's so many different things.
I think that gives us a great idea of what it means to be a sustainability consultant, because it sounds like you have to kind of be an expert at a lot of different things.
Well, and you don't have to be an expert at everything, but you can have a team around you who are experts in different things. And then the idea, and I didn't talk a lot about the other jobs that I've had. There's been a lot of education in my past, not necessarily in architecture or so on, but it's like you want to, the people around you can also be sustainability champions, and you're just kind of opening their eyes to the opportunity, and then they themselves find their own interests and bring that to a project. So you create sustainability champions around a studio that can help sort of move ideas forward. And it's branching out into engineering, with embodied carbon, it's with structural engineering. But also now, I was at an event a couple of days or a couple of weeks ago, and the Wild West of the Wild West is embodied carbon with mechanical engineering and plumbing. And the more the more you realize there's more to know, which is what I love about the built environment. There's always something new to learn and something new to figure out, and how you can contribute to making those changes.
All right, thank you, Mona. We have now a question for Mari. These are two different questions, but the first question is if you could share the quantity of how much water would a fountain consume versus a misty one. I think this is in reference to your installation in the summertime with the water misters. And the second question is if you have any advice on how to prepare on pursuing an academic path in architecture.
Okay, great. Okay, the first question is, how much water does a water fountain give versus a mister?
Versus a mister, yeah.
I don't have it off the top of my head. And it also depends obviously on the water fountain and you know, if it's a typical water fountain. But I do know that misters, in terms of misters are very water efficient because they really throttle the water. So it's like 1 gallon per, depending on, there's a calculation that I could look up. Again, don't have it off the top of my head, but I do know that in terms of climate control and bringing relief to human beings, if you sit under shade, that is really helpful. So, for example, if in the downtown east side, which is very suffers from the urban heat island effect, if there's shade, that's very helpful. If there's a mister, it's the same amount of relief. If you put them together, it like triples. It exponentially, you know, improves the relief. So, that's just kind of a principle that I work with. But I'm sorry, I don't have the numbers. If you are really interested, email me because I have that on other, written out somewhere. In terms of the other question from Hannah about pursuing an academic path in architecture, great question. First of all, if you are still a student, I would highly recommend that you apply to be a TA, because it'll give you experience. And it'll also kind of like doing an internship. Like, is this something you like the idea of, or do you really like interacting with people and talking to them about their design for like 5 hours in a row, a couple days a week? So it's really intense. And I mean, obviously I love it. I've done it for so many years, but it's a great way. And also it's a good way to like kind of start developing a track record, same as anything like portfolio building. I would say that my second piece of advice is that with, you know, architecture is a kind of funny, it occupies a kind of funny position in academia between kind of praxis and pure research. And so there are people like Patricia Patkow who whose practice was her research. So because we're hired on the basis that we are good teachers, but also that we have like a legit research or practice that we're pursuing that is something that is offers something new to the profession. And so you could pursue an academic career based on the strength of your design practice. That's a very tricky one to do because often you're pursuing a career in your 30s and it takes until 40s, 50s, 60s to have a design practice that is award-winning and is prominent. So there's a little bit of a time mismatch there, but some people manage. And the other way to get into academia is on the basis of your research. So if you you know, do projects, write papers, organize events, and do something that kind of makes, again, a contribution to the discipline that will be recognized as something that's like really unique and full of potential and will attract you to kind of a hiring committee within academia. So hopefully I explained that. And it looks like it's another question. Should I keep going answering or should we pass it to someone else?
There's actually just a general question about kids and kind of the pressure of timing of having kids and building a career. If this is just a general question for all the panelists, if you could please share your thoughts or advice if you've ever experienced imposter syndrome, or if you could share how you viewed your own skills and values in your field, and for your employers and clients, and how that has grown or changed over time.
Do we all have kids? We all do. For that. So I don't have to answer first. Someone else can answer.
I might actually need you to repeat the question. It was
So it was to share if you've ever experienced imposter syndrome, and how or how you viewed your own skills and value for the field and the employers, and how that's maybe changed over time.
I think imposter syndrome every day. Like, and it comes from the fact that, you know, the more you know you need to know. And
Yeah.
so it's like, and so I think it's just that desire to always learn more. And so and so using that same kind of phrase, it's like, you actually probably know a lot. And the fact that you know that there's more you need to know means that you're probably in a good place. And that it's okay sometimes to say, I don't know, but I will look that up for you. Or I don't know because that's an emerging field. Or I don't know because of another thing. It's, you know, we as architects are systems thinkers. We are generalists and can also be very kind of technical and focused in certain areas. But maybe I'll let some of the others give their thoughts and ideas.
Yeah, I'll jump in there. I completely agree with Mona. I think it's interesting. This idea of imposter syndrome is like, I totally get it. We all feel it all the time. But somehow it's become tied to women, professional women. And I don't know if it has anything to do with kids or has anything to do with whether or not you are had to take a mat leave or not. But sometimes I worry that those kinds of dialogues are self-fulfilling. And that we create for ourselves the sense that there is, you know, the imposter syndrome is a thing that we should be feeling. I mean, the truth is, you're exactly right, Mona. Like, from my perspective, I think it just means that we acknowledge that growth must continue for ourselves in our own professions. So that's, you know, that's probably means that you're reflective and thoughtful about yourself. I think separately, I think being a mom and having a profession, no matter what the profession, I think is definitely tricky, and it because of the leaves, and because you know, I think this sense that you're missing out if you're on a leave. But I'm going to kind of use a fairly cheesy line. I actually went to the Michelle Obama when she came to town and spoke, and she talked about her legal career. She talked about family, and her line, which I kind of repeat actually to women, you know, to interns that I mentor a lot, which is just like, you can have it all, but you just can't have it at the same time. That was her line. And I was like, yes, that's true of families and children, but that's actually true of other things. Like, do I want art? Do I want publishing? Do I want architecture? I could want it all, but maybe not all at the same time. And kind of leads to another component of a way of thinking, which is, you know, sometimes you have to be nimble, sometimes you have to be strategic, and strategy is sacrifice. It means you might have to sacrifice something to prioritize something else, and that's okay. That doesn't make you a lesser human. That actually just makes you normal. So yeah, I have begun to kind of not like the imposter syndrome conversation, because it just feels like it could be, it's self-fulfilling somehow. That makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with both of you so much. It's so helpful to have these conversations. I feel like a lot of the time, we talk about our careers a lot, but we don't talk about like the struggle, which is real, which is to be a mom and have a career. And I mean, I didn't get a mat leave. I actually had my baby at the same time as Maddie. We were pregnant together, and I was so envious because being in academia, she got a mat leave, it was paid, and like I'm self-employed. Like I went back to work right away. Like I was at the store breastfeeding with like a scarf over my boob while I'm ringing in orders at the front desk trying to work and breastfeed at the same time. Like I, couldn't afford to hire somebody to run my store for me, so that I could take a mat leave, right? I didn't have an employer, I didn't have benefits, self-employed. That's what happens. I'm not complaining. There's a lot of benefits to not having a boss as well. Like I could just go in the back and breastfeed. I could take my kid to work. I could sit on the sofa while she had a nap. Like, I could come and go as I pleased. Like, there's a lot of benefits as well to being self-employed. I saw a question in the chat about like, says, did you have any troubles balancing pivotal points in your career and being a mom? So in 2013, my daughter was about 1.5 years old, and the hair salon that was next to my store came up for lease. And I knew I needed a bigger store if I wanted to really sell furniture properly. And I knew that I could tear down the wall between the two spaces because it was all one building. There wasn't like a fire separation. And I was like, if I don't rent this space, someone else is going to. So I need to take it. And so I went into doing a full reno on that space when Ellie was 1.5 years old. And that was very stressful. And the timing was terrible on it. And I think I was really hard on myself that I wasn't being, a good enough mom. And, I think as architects as well, a lot of us tend to be type A. We tend to be perfectionists. We tend to want our house to be clean and look nice and dress well and have our hair washed and be good moms and run our professional lives. And like, yeah, like as Bao said, you can't, it's impossible. You can't do all those things. And I had to learn just not to be so hard on myself and to realize that I can't do everything and to choose my battles. And actually my daughter sent me a really cute meme the other day. And it's like this mom laying in bed and she's thinking to herself like, oh, I should have done more with them today. Like I should have cooked them a better meal. I shouldn't have let them watch so much TV. And then it flashes to like the kids' thoughts and they're just like, oh, I love my mom. I love cuddling in bed watching TV. I love eating chicken McNuggets. So it's like you think you're doing a bad job, but like really you're probably doing just fine.
Those are great responses. I'm trying to think about which question to respond to first, because they're kind of I have different responses to both of them, but maybe the imposter syndrome thing. I don't really feel like I have imposter syndrome because I'm a woman. But I do feel like there are people whose there's maybe whose families, like there's knowledge gained from like watching your parent who's a professor operate in a certain way, and that was transferred down, or just an idea that like you just stand in a room and own the room, which could be where I'm standing, both men and women do. So but I do feel like there's other factors that that influence how people occupy their jobs and their kind of self-images of what they are and how they deserve that job or how to operate in it. So I think it's a little, for me, what I see is more complicated than that. And there's a lot of class issues and maybe immigrant issues maybe to go into that. As for being a mom, I could talk about that forever. But I think that if I weren't a mom, I'd be like a really scary person right now. I would be like, I'd probably be like, I don't know, I'd probably look just like kind of haggard because I would just work so hard. And I'd just be like all skinny and like have maybe, written a lot of books by now, but like not be a very healthy person. So I'm really grateful to the fact that being a mother connects me to humanity at like the most like the most deep level. And it makes me have so much love for everyone, you know, in a way that like I don't think I had before. So yeah, so I think of it as like not something that pulls away, but something that has given me so much. And yeah, I'm really grateful for. I highly recommend it. It is true that I did get a year of mat leave and you know, have support around me, so that also does help. Not everyone has that in the same way, but I do acknowledge that those are also forces that help me in my life.
So I didn't answer the mom question. I'm also a mom. I'm a mother of twins. And so, word of warning, the longer you wait to have children, the more chances you have of having a multiple birth. So keep that in mind. But I was very happy to have twins. I have a boy and a girl. And I took a full year of mat leave and I 100% checked out of work. I did not open an email. I did not do anything. I had one meeting with the CEO. I was in my nonprofit world at that time, and it was based in the U.S. And so, you know, maternity privileges are different in the U.S. than they are in Canada. And so they were trying to get me to come back early, and I said no. And in fact, I said I'm going to take one extra month. And I came back to the same job and continued to grow in my career without any sort of problems. And so I balanced, you know, work and travel and children and you know, but as some of the others said, you know, you do have to make your choices. You know, it's about balance. You know, you can't have it all. And I remember, you know, I thought I could have it all. And, you know, there's this woman who wrote a book called Briefcase Moms. And so I read the book and I tried to understand, and she was helping, you know, and she's actually here in British Columbia. She's a business coach. But yeah, it just kind of helped me realize and not to compare yourself to others, because you have no idea what's going on in their head or at home or anywhere else. It's like you have to make the choices that make the sense for you. And I'm not saying it was never easy. It was always kind of, it's like you're always kind of asking yourself what's right, what's wrong, what's going to work, what's not going to work. But it's more about finding the balance that works for you, because everybody has different sort of abilities to handle more or less stress. So it's like making the balancing decisions that work for you, and adjusting, because, you know, I'm still sort of having that conversation with myself. My kids are 14 now. I'm now, you know, I'm separated. And so it's like, it's an ever evolving sort of approach. And so it was different when they were 3. It's different when they started school. Now they're teenagers. And my career, you know, is continuing to kind of evolve. And so it's not black and white.
I think
and that's okay.
Yeah. So what I'm getting is there's not one specific, you know, tailored answer to this question, really. It's that do what's right for you, and you can have it all, just not at the same time. That's something that I'm going to write in my notebook. I do have
That's
to
Michelle
refer. Oh. Credits too. I do have to refer to Sally on time because I'm just looking at the time. And I do want to thank everybody for participating, and those of you who are still on, thank you for sticking around, because we're quite a bit much later now. But at one point, I think there was about 80 participants on this Zoom call, so what a great turnout. And a special thank you to our speakers as well, for sharing your life journey with us today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that was
for inviting us.
Great wrap up, Andrea. Thank you everyone who joined us today. And thank you again to all of our panelists for your time, sharing your stories with us. And I know a lot of us really benefit from hearing about your journeys. So thank you so much.
Thanks
Thanks for
for
having me.
Thanks, everyone.